He came just to fix a leaking sink, but the moment she whispered, "You're the only one who keeps promises," he realized. Some things break just so the right person can walk in to repair them. The morning was quiet, the kind that carries a soft chill before noon. He loaded his toolbox into the van, just another routine job. An address across town, a leaky sink, maybe a clogged pipe. Nothing unusual, but something about the way her voice had sounded on the phone stayed with him. Calm, polite, a little tired, like someone used to disappointment but still holding on to grace. When she opened the door, it wasn't what he expected. She stood there in a cream cardigan, her hair loosely tied, eyes that met his with a gentleness that didn't feel practiced. "You must be the plumber," she said, her tone measured yet welcoming. Behind her, the house was immaculate. Everything in its place, yet somehow too quiet. No TV hum, no phone ringing, just the faint scent of coffee and lavender cleaner. He stepped inside, setting down his tools near the kitchen counter. The light filtering through the curtains painted the countertops gold, but it also revealed little signs of wear. A chipped mug, a water stain near the window, a sink that had seen too many mornings alone. She hovered nearby, offering him tea, then retracting the offer as if unsure whether it was appropriate. "It's just been dripping for days," she said, almost apologetically. "I tried calling others, but—" Her voice trailed off. He nodded, kneeling beneath the counter, wrench in hand. The steady rhythm of the drip echoed through the silence like a slow clock. She stood a few steps away, watching, her arms folded, not out of impatience, but like someone holding themselves together. He noticed little things. How her nails were neatly kept but unpolished. How she turned her wedding ring absent-mindedly even though the metal was faintly dull. How she sighed quietly when she thought he wasn't listening. "Won't take long," he said, trying to ease the air. She smiled politely, a brief flicker that didn't quite reach her eyes. As he worked, their words stayed simple. Small talk about the weather, how the city was changing, how hard it was to find reliable people anymore. She mentioned she lived alone now, softly, like it wasn't something she often said out loud. When he finished, he tested the tap. No leak, no sound but the clean rush of water. "All good now," he said, standing and wiping his hands. She exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath. "Thank you," she said, handing him a glass of water. "You actually came when you said you would. Most people don't." It was such an ordinary line, but something about it made him pause. There was weight beneath her words, something that hinted at promises broken long before he ever arrived. As he packed his tools, he found himself glancing at her one last time. She stood in the doorway, sunlight brushing her cheek, a quiet figure in a house that felt too large for one heart. Driving away, he thought about her tone. Not desperate, not flirtatious, just grateful. And somehow that made it linger. That was the day he fixed a leak, but something in him whispered, this wasn't the last time he'd see her. He didn't expect to think about her again. Jobs came and went. Different houses, different stories. But hers kept circling back like a quiet echo. Maybe it was the way she'd said thank you, as if those two words carried more history than gratitude should. A few days later, he found himself in her neighborhood again. He slowed near her street without meaning to, eyes catching on the pale curtains in her window. Felt foolish, so he kept driving. But the thought lingered. People who live alone often try too hard to sound fine. When her number appeared on his phone that Friday morning, he almost smiled. "It's still working," she said with a small laugh, referring to the sink. "But I think the drain might be a little slow. If you're nearby, maybe you could take a look." He told himself it was just another call. But when she opened the door, her expression softened like she hadn't expected him to come so soon. "You're early," she said, stepping aside. The air smelled faintly of baking, something with cinnamon, and the light inside felt warmer this time. He got to work, tools clinking softly against tile. She moved around him, not hovering but near enough to notice. He could feel her presence. Quiet, composed, but somehow restless. As he unscrewed the drain cap, a muffled voice caught his attention. She was on the phone in the other room. Her tone had changed. Low, uncertain. I understand, yes, I know. I just thought. Then silence. A sigh. The kind that sounds like someone folding themselves smaller. When she returned, she smiled again. Too quickly. Sorry about that. Just work things. He nodded, pretending not to notice the red in her eyes. Happens to all of us, he said, testing the pipes. Sometimes things get backed up for no reason at all. The corner of her mouth twitched into a smile. That's one way to put it. The tension lightened a little. They talked about simpler things, coffee brands, broken appliances, how everyone forgets to take care of the small stuff until it breaks. He found himself wanting to keep her laughing. Each time she did, it was soft, unguarded, like she didn't quite remember how it felt. As he adjusted the pipe, a droplet splashed his wrist. Before he could wipe it, she instinctively reached out with a towel. Her fingers brushed his skin. Barely a second, and she froze, embarrassed. Sorry, reflex, she murmured. It's fine, he said quickly, though his heartbeat betrayed him. There was nothing romantic in the gesture, yet everything about it felt intimate. He finished the repair and she walked him to the door. The late afternoon light slanted across her face, warm and tender. Thank you, she said again. Most people don't even call back. You did. He smiled. Just keeping my word. As he left, that line replayed in his head. Most people don't even call back. It wasn't about plumbing. It was about trust. About showing up when no one else did. And without realizing it, that promise, the one he thought was small, had just begun to mean something far greater to her, and to him. It had been a week since he last saw her. The days blurred together. Routine repairs, late lunches, quiet evenings. But her voice lingered in the back of his mind like a half-remembered song. He told himself it was just her kindness that stuck with him. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The call came on a calm Wednesday morning. Hi, she said softly, almost hesitant. It's probably nothing, but the heater's been acting strange. Could you stop by when you have time? He checked his schedule. It was packed. But somehow an hour later he was pulling up outside her house. The sky was a gentle gray, the kind that makes everything feel slower, more personal. When she opened the door, she smiled in that quiet way again. Grateful but unsure if she should be. Sorry to trouble you again, she said, stepping aside. I just didn't know who else to call. He told her not to worry and began checking the heater, though everything seemed fine. The pipes hummed steadily, no sign of a leak, no flicker in the flame. Still, he lingered, pretending to double-check. She stood nearby, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. You always come when you say you will, she said. That's rare these days. He glanced up, just keeping promises. Her eyes lifted to meet his, steady, searching. You'd be surprised how few people do. They sat at the kitchen counter while he finished the inspection report. She poured him a cup of coffee without asking, as if it had already become part of their unspoken ritual. The aroma filled the air, rich, warm, grounding. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful, almost fragile. Then she said it, almost under her breath, as if she hadn't meant for it to slip out. You're the only one who keeps promises. The words hung between them, quiet but heavy. He looked up slowly. She didn't take them back. Her gaze stayed fixed on the steam rising from her mug, her thumb tracing circles against the ceramic. He felt the air shift, something deeper than gratitude, yet softer than confession. He wanted to respond, to tell her that showing up wasn't a favor. It was instinct, but instead he just nodded. I try my best. She smiled, that faint curve of her lips that said more than words could. That's all anyone can do. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, rattling them gently. He caught himself watching how the light fell across her face, how it touched her skin like it knew her story. Every detail, the loose strand of hair near her ear, the faint tiredness beneath her eyes, felt human and unfiltered. When he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. Thank you, she said again, though it sounded different this time. More personal, more vulnerable. He didn't realize until later, driving away, How deeply those words had rooted themselves in him. You're the only one who keeps promises. He'd fixed 100 heaters before that day, but never one that warmed something inside him like her voice did. He told himself he was only checking in, just making sure everything was still working, the heater, the sink, the usual. But each time he found an excuse to call or stop by, he noticed she didn't question it. If anything, she seemed quietly relieved to see him. One afternoon, a week after that last visit, he stopped by with a part he'd forgotten to install. It wasn't necessary, he knew that. But when she opened the door and smiled, her expression carried something that made every small lie feel harmless. "Still fixing things, I see," she said softly. Her tone was teasing, but her eyes gave away something gentler. She stepped aside to let him in. Inside, the air smelled like vanilla and dusted books. The house was filled with the kind of calm that only comes from years of solitude, neat, predictable, a little too still. On the table sat a half-finished crossword, a single cup of tea, and a folded letter she quickly moved aside. While he worked, she hovered nearby, folding laundry, pretending to be busy. Eventually, she leaned against the counter and asked, "Do you ever get tired of fixing things?" He smiled, not looking up. "Sometimes, but I like seeing the moment when something starts working again. Makes it worth it." She paused, her fingers brushing the edge of the countertop. "I used to think that too," she said. "About people." The silence that followed was thick, stretching between them like a thread neither wanted to pull. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "My husband used to be the one who handled all this. He left 3 years ago. Said he needed a life that felt alive again." She tried to laugh but couldn't. "Guess I made things too quiet." He turned toward her then. She wasn't crying, just staring at the window as if watching something far away. He didn't say sorry. She didn't need pity. Instead, he handed her the wrench. "Hold this." Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and for a moment, their eyes met. Long enough for both to feel it, but neither to name it. Outside, rain began to tap gently against the glass. The sound filled the silence they couldn't. She handed the wrench back, smiling faintly. "You make it look easy." He shook his head. "Only because I know where to look." When he finished, she handed him a towel for his hands. Her fingertips grazed his palm. Unintentionally, maybe, but the touch lingered. The air between them changed, almost humming. He could have said something then, something simple, something brave, but instead he nodded, collecting his tools. She walked him to the door, and as he stepped outside, the reflection of the rain shimmered in her eyes. He didn't look back until he reached his van. Through the window, she was still standing there, arms folded loosely, watching him leave. And though neither said a word, he could feel her silence following him home, like a conversation unfinished. It was late, the kind of evening when the sky turns dark too early and the city quiets before it should. He had just finished another long shift when her name lit up his phone. For a second, he thought it was a mistake. She never called after dusk. Her voice came through, trembling but controlled. "I'm sorry to bother you." A pipe burst under the sink. "There's water everywhere." I didn't know who else to call. He didn't even think. "I'm on my way." By the time he arrived, the rain had started outside. The front porch light glowed softly, catching the drops on his jacket as he knocked. She opened the door, barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater that hung loosely on her shoulders. The floor behind her glistened with puddles of water, a towel clutched uselessly in her hand. "Sorry," she whispered, stepping aside. "It just happened so fast." He knelt immediately, toolbox open, flashlight cutting through the mess. Water sprayed from a cracked joint, splashing against the cabinet. "I've got it," he said, voice steady, though his pulse wasn't. She crouched beside him, holding the flashlight. Her hair fell over her face, damp at the ends. "I should have turned off the main valve, but It's okay," he said gently. "You did fine." They worked side by side, close enough that he could feel her breath when she leaned in. The smell of soap and rain filled the small kitchen. The light trembled in her hand, and at one point she reached to steady the pipe, her fingers brushing against his. Just skin on skin, warm, human, electric. Neither spoke. The water slowed, then stopped completely. Silence filled the space, broken only by the faint sound of rain outside. He exhaled, wiping his hands on a rag. "All fixed," he murmured, though neither moved away. When he looked up, she was already watching him. Their faces were only inches apart, too close for strangers, too charged for friends. Her eyes searched his like she was trying to decide something. For one suspended moment, everything in the room seemed to hold still. The dripping faucet, the hum of the fridge, even their breathing. He could feel her hesitation, the war between wanting comfort and fearing what it meant to take it. Then she blinked, stepping back. The light shifted. "We shouldn't," she whispered, barely audible. He nodded slowly, his chest tight. "I know." She smiled, small and sad. "You're always so sure of what's right." He wanted to tell her he wasn't. That sometimes right and wrong blur when you care too much. But he didn't. Instead, he packed his tools quietly, the sound of metal on metal filling the silence they didn't dare to break. At the door, she stopped him. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice unsteady. "For coming. For everything." He met her eyes one last time. Always. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried that charged stillness. Like something had nearly happened. Something they both would remember in the quiet hours that followed. The next few days felt heavier, stretched thin between what was said and what wasn't. He told himself to focus on work, to let things settle, to forget how it felt when her hand brushed his, how her voice trembled when she said, "We shouldn't." But forgetting was harder than he thought. Every sound reminded him of that night. The hum of a kitchen light, the slow drip of a faucet, the quiet between raindrops. He didn't call. Neither did she. The silence became its own kind of conversation, one that said maybe this is for the best, and maybe it's already too late to undo what we felt. A week passed before her name appeared on his phone again. It wasn't a call this time, just a message. "Thank you for everything. You've been kind. I just need time." He stared at the words for a long time, reading between them. There was no anger, no rejection, just distance, the kind that comes when two hearts realize they're standing on fragile ground. He typed a reply, then deleted it, then another. Finally, he sent only one word, "Always." After that, nothing. He tried to fill his days with noise. Longer shifts, new clients, anything to keep his mind busy. But quiet moments always pulled him back. Sometimes he caught himself driving past her street, pretending it was the shortcut home. One evening, he parked for a moment near her house. The porch light glowed like a small promise, steady against the dark. Through the window, he could see her reading on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, a soft smile on her face. She looked peaceful, lighter, like she'd finally found her breath again. He sat there for a while, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart caught somewhere between relief and ache. He realized then that maybe loving someone didn't always mean staying close. Sometimes it meant stepping back, letting them heal in their own quiet way. He thought about all the times he'd come to fix things. Pipes, heaters, leaks. But what he hadn't noticed was how often she tried to fix herself. How she'd been learning, slowly, to trust that not everything broken needed replacing. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain. He smiled, a little sad, a little proud. She didn't need him to be her rescue, just her reminder that people could still keep their word. He started the van and drove off, the streetlights blurring softly in his mirrors. For the first time in weeks, the quiet didn't feel empty, felt earned, like closure. But even as he told himself it was over, a part of him, the quiet, stubborn part, hoped that someday, when everything had settled and the silence had softened, he might hear her voice again. And maybe, just maybe, she'd call. Not because something broke, but because she wanted to say hello. Spring came quietly that year, soft and unannounced. The air carried the faint sweetness of new leaves and distant rain, the kind of weather that makes the world feel forgiving again. He had stopped expecting to hear from her. Months had passed since that night, since her message. Life had folded back into rhythm. Work, late dinners, long drives with the window half open. But every so often, when he heard water running or the soft creak of an old pipe, he'd think of her, the woman with the calm voice and the house that always smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Then, one afternoon, his phone buzzed. A simple text, no leaks this time, just coffee. He read it twice, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. When he arrived, the garden was different, brighter. Potted flowers lined the porch, their colors gentle but alive. She met him at the door, hair loose around her shoulders, a lightness in her face he hadn't seen before. "I figured I owed you one that didn't involve fixing something," she said. Her tone was playful, but her eyes held the same quiet sincerity that had always disarmed him. He followed her to the backyard where a small table waited under a flowering tree. 2 cups, teapot. Sunlight dappled the wooden surface, turning everything golden. They sat facing each other, the afternoon hum of bees and distant birds filling the pauses. She poured his coffee carefully, her fingers brushing his when she handed him the cup. The touch was soft, not hesitant this time, just familiar. "I've been better," she said, answering a question he hadn't asked. "Things still break sometimes, but I don't panic anymore." He smiled. "That's good to hear." She looked up, her eyes warm and steady. "You fixed more than a sink, you know?" The words landed quietly, the way truth often does. He didn't know what to say. He'd spent months wondering what he'd meant to her, if he'd crossed a line or filled a void. Now, sitting across from her in the soft light, he realized it didn't matter. Whatever it was, it had been real. "Guess I just showed up," he said. "Exactly," she replied. "That's all most people ever need." A breeze stirred between them, carrying the scent of fresh blooms. She leaned back, relaxed in a way that told him she'd made peace with her solitude, but also with him. For a while, they talked about nothing and everything. Books she'd started reading, the neighbor's new dog, the little things that fill a life quietly. When it was time to go, he stood, hesitating for a moment. "Call me if anything ever leaks again," he said, half teasing, half sincere. She laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh that filled the garden like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I might just do that," she said. As he walked back to his van, he glanced over his shoulder. She was still there, sitting in that warm light, one hand resting around her coffee cup. And for the first time, he didn't feel the ache of leaving. Because some promises, he realized, don't end when the job's done. They keep quietly living in the spaces we once helped repair.